Okay, 802.1x, typical authentication progression. The typical authentication procedure consists of initialization on, initialization to, negotiation, authentication. That is the four-way handshake. So you have the initialization on, detection for a new supplicant. The port on the switch, the authenticator, is enabled to set to unauthorized state. In this state, only 802.1x traffic is allowed. Other traffic, such as Internet Protocol, and with that TCP and UDP, is dropped. Okay. So the port on the switch, the authenticator, is enabled as an unauthorized state, and only 802.1x traffic is allowed. Initiation to initiate authentication, the authenticator will probably periodically transmit EAP requests identity frames to a special layer 2 address on the local network segment. On the local 2 network segment, the supplicant listens to this address, and on receipt of the EAP request identity frame, it responds with an EAP response. So the authenticator sends EAP identity frames. Okay. I don't know what special layer 2 address means, like a broadcast. It should just say broadcast if that's the special. The supplicant listens on this address, and on receipt of the EAP request identity frame, it responds with an EAP response. So the authenticator is requesting a response. The supplicant sends the response. The authenticator sends requests, and then the supplicant responds to that request, to the identity frame containing an identifier for the supplicant, such as a user ID. The authenticator then encapsulates this identity response in a radius access request and forwards it to the authentication server. Okay. The authenticator encapsulates the user ID and password in an access request packet and forwards it to the authentication server. The supplicant may also initiate or restart authentication by sending a EAP over LAN start frame to the authenticator, which will then reply with a EAP request identity frame. Okay. Then the negotiations happen. What? Okay. Negotiation. Technically EAP negotiations. So the EAP protocol comes into play here. The authentication server sends a reply to the authenticator. The authentication server sends a reply against the access request packet. So first there's an identifier, then a response, then the authenticator sends the request authentication packet to the authentication server, And then the application sends a reply encapsulated in the radius challenge packet. Access request. Challenge access request. The supplicant. Okay. And the authentication server sends a reply. Oh, the reply is an access challenge. So let's get this straight. All right. Let's get this a little bit going on here. The supplicant sends the request. Authentication server and the authenticator. All right. So now, we got the supplicant, authenticator, and the authentication server. Okay. So now, what do we do? So I gotta go back all the way up. So the radius access request, access accept, access reject, access challenge. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. This is a request. How do I do request? RQ. This is a request. Okay. So if it's a request, request. Access request. Okay. Let's do a capital Q. Do, 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 do. Right. That's a access perfect. Request. Okay. So then the authenticator, this guy, sends a identity. So okay. Then this no. This is the no. Okay, that is wrong. So there's no connection. So I first send the authenticator sends the identity request. No. Request identity response. So a response. I'm going to do response identity. I. A I. RI. Did it incorrectly? No, I just did halves. Okay. I just did halves. Okay. Response identity. Then the authenticator sends a access request. Okay. So access request. Access request. Access request. So that was an RI response to an identity. Then it is, so the authenticator gets the RI, then sends an RQ. Is that right? That's not right. That's right. This is an R. An RQ. Response request. All right. This way. Then an access challenge this way. All right, I need my letters smaller. So response identity, response request, access request. Okay, so the supplicant sends the response identity. Okay. So if the, so it comes here, and it's still smaller. There. That is the response. Response identity. Response to the identity request. Okay. So I can move this guy up here. And then I'll make these guys a little bit smaller too. Okay. That is an RQ. RQ. R Q. All right. So I get a response identity, then request, access request, then access challenge. Okay. An access challenge. Access challenge. Alright, so then after the access request, the authentication server sends access challenge. Access challenge. An access challenge. Requesting more identity. Who you are. Okay. So so what? An access challenge. Okay, so I think I am halfway done. One, 2, 3, 4. And that turns into accessed EAP request. All right. So that is an EAP request. All right. So access challenge EAP authenticator sends the EAP request to the supplicant. Okay. So that's an EQ. An EQ. EQ. Then an EAP response turns into an access request. Then access accept. Okay. So then this turns into EAP response. An EAP response. Okay. So an EAP response. Yeah. So ER. Okay, so then that EAP response from that EAP request turns to an access request. Okay. From the authenticator to the authentication server. Never studied like this before. This is pretty awesome. Okay. All right. Okay, so this is an accessed request. This is an AQ. Oh, this is another access request. Access challenge. EAP request. EAP response. Access requests. Requested entity. I know. I'm going to change that to access requests. Yep. Access request. That is an access request with another access request. Okay. And then access accept. Access accept. Okay. So if I jump that over here and do this, I need two A's. Access accept. A. All right. Okay, so this is an EAP, an 802.1x authentication process. The supplicant sends a response identity, then the authenticator sends a response access request to the authentication server. Authentication server sends an access challenge to the authenticator. Then the authenticator sends an EAP request to the supplicant. Then the supplicant sends an EAP response to the authenticator. And then the authenticator sends an access request to the authentication server. And the authentication server says access accept or reject. Okay. Okay. Negotiation. Technically an EAP negotiation. The authentication server sends a reply encapsulated in the radius challenge request packet. The authenticator sends to the authenticator, containing EAP requests specifying the EAP method, the type of EAP authentication it wishes the supplicant to perform. Then that EAP request gets sent over by an EAP pull frame and transmitted to the supplicant. At this point, the supplicant can start using EAP request method or do a negative acknowledgement response with an EAP method it is willing to perform. If the authentication server and supplicant agree on the EAP method, EAP requests and responses are sent between the supplicant and the authentication server, translated by the authenticator, until the authentication server responds with either a EAP success message, access accept, or access reject. Access, if authentication is successful, set the port to authorized. State normal traffic allowed. If unsuccessful, remains unauthorized. Okay. This is kind of cool. Okay. Don't care about the implementations. MAB. Mac Authentication Bypass. Not all devices support 802.1x. Authentication examples include network printers. Whoops, there goes the supplicant. network printers, and Ethernet-based electronics like environmental sensors, cameras, and wireless phones. For those devices to be used in a protected network environment, alternative mechanisms must be provided to authenticate them. One option would be to disable 802.1x on that port and leave that port unprotected and open for abuse. Another slightly more reliable option is to use MAB. When MAB is configured on a port, that port will first try to check if the connected device is 802.1x compliant. If no reaction is received, the connected device, it will try to authenticate with the AAA server using the connected device's MAC address as a username and password. The network administrator then must make provisions on the Radius server to authenticate those MAC addresses either by adding them to a regular users or implementing additional logic to resolve them in a network inventory database. Alright. Vulnerabilities of 802.1x. In the summer of 2005, posted an article detailing a serious vulnerability in the 802.1x profile involving man-in-the-middle attack. In summary, the flaws stems from the fact that 802.1x authenticates only at the beginning of the connection, but after that authentication, it is possible for an attacker to use the authenticated port if he has the ability to physically insert himself, perhaps using a workgroup hub between the authenticated computer and the port. Riley suggests that for wired networks, the use of IPsec or combination of IPsec and 802.1x would be more secure. EPOL logoff frames transmitted by the 802.1x supplicant are sent in a clear and contain no data derived from the credential exchange that initially authenticated the client. What did that say there? Logoff frames transmitted by the 802.1x supplicant are sent in the clear and contain no data derived from the credentials exchanged that the identity authenticated the client. They are therefore traversely easy to spoof on shared media and can be used as part of a targeted DOS on both wired and wireless LANs. An EPOL logoff attack is a malicious third party with access to the medium the authenticator is attached to. Repeatedly sending frogged EPOL logoff frames from the target device's MAC address. So the authenticator, believing the targeted device wishes to end the authentication, closes the target's authentication, blocking traffic ingressing from the target. Okay. The 802.1x 2010 specification began as 802.1af addressed vulnerabilities in previous 802.1x specifications using MACsec's 802.1 AE to encrypt data between logical ports running on top of physical address, a physical port, and IE and IEEE 802.1 AR authenticated devices. As a stopgap until these enhances are widely implemented, some vendors have extended the 802.1x 2001 and 2004 protocol, allowing multiple concurrent authentication sessions to occur on a single port. While this prevents traffic from the device with unauthenticated MAC addresses ingressing on an 802.1x authenticated port, it will not stop malicious device snooping on traffic from the authenticated device, providing no protection against MAC spoofing or EPOL logoff attacks. Okay, so that's 802.1x. Now we can get to the radius. Hopefully, accounting, roaming, proxy options, security, packet structure, security, history, and that's it, right? So I need to know the packet structure, accounting. I need to know accounting. I did the authorization access requests. I think this is easy. Start, request, interim update, response. Yeah, I don't need accounting. Roaming I do need. Radius is commonly used to facilitate roaming between ISPs, for example, by companies which provide a single global set of credentials that are used on many public networks, by independent but collaborating institutions issuing their own credentials to their own servers that allows a visitor from another server to be authenticated on a home institution such as EduRoam. No, that's not what I thought roaming was going to be. Okay. Okay, packet structure. The radius packet data format is shown to the right. The fields are transmitted from left to right, starting with the code, the identifier, the length, and the indicator, and attributes. So the code, if it was a code 3, it would be reject. Packet identifier. What is the authenticator? Okay, so the packet structure is that. First bit is a 255. Then the second bit is the identifier. The next 2 bits is the length. And then authenticator APVs. What is an APV? Attribute valued pairs. Value pairs. Oh, yeah. What's that show do? Oh. So they go all up to 190 so far, but probably it is set for 1 bit. So, oh no, it's not one. It's continuous, but the first bit starts there. So the type is frame IP address here, and the length there, and the value there. Okay. Vendor specific attributes. Radius is extensible. Many vendors of Radius hardware and software implement their own variants using vendor specific attributes. Microsoft has published some of their VSAs. Definitions from many other companies remain proprietary and or ad hoc. Nonetheless, many VSA dictionaries can be found by downloading the source code of open radius implementations, for example, free radius or open radius. Okay, that's radius. Okay, good. Now I understand radius, 802.1x, and EPOL authentications. Now I gotta figure out chapter 1. Okay. No, that's Amazon? Fire. Cal. Calibri. Is it Calibri? AZW. What is my installed programs? Amazon Kindle. It's a Kindle. Okay. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Over here. There, and then to Kindle. Okay, so now it's black. Great. And there we go. Okay. RF boundaries. Unlike data that transverse on a bounded wired network infrastructure such as Ethernet, wireless networks use radio frequency for communication, and this is an unbounded medium used to send and receive data. Like other types of RF communications, 802.11 wireless signals can easily pass through many types of obstacles and various construction materials, which can allow for signals to propagate into unsecure areas where eavesdroppers and intruders may be present, and monitoring the air for valuable information. Wireless LAN designers, administrators, and users must take special precautions to ensure that their transmitted data remains private because of physical RF security is not easily achieved. One cannot rely on the fact that someone monitoring the air with easily obtainable programs would be noticed or seen. Keep in mind that for WLAN communications to be successful, devices must be able to hear each other's transmissions. However, with the proper software and tools and equipment, an intruder may be able to monitor RF communications from both distance and while not being noticed. She will be able to use the information collected from the unbound medium. Just because the intruder cannot be heard by the wireless network does not mean they will be able to gather and use the information that is exchanged between the wireless network devices. Such software tools for this type of eavesdropping are freely available from the internet, and someone with limited skill set will be able to easily gather valuable information from a wireless network that lacks adequate security solution. Usage threat assessment. Usage threat assessment. Relying on legacy 802.11 and weak security mechanisms is like having a glass house. There can be no expectation of privacy. Legacy solutions are those that are predicted by the 802.11 standard or that were never good security solutions in the first place. It is important to understand the various wireless vulnerabilities that exist from the different types of WLAN deployments. Whether the WLAN is a home, small, office, or enterprise installation, all WLANs have their share of vulnerabilities for personal and business uses. Considerations for personal use threat assessment. Anonymous intruders may perform illegal computer activities through an open wireless networks. Intruders may compromise a home user's privacy. Intruders may learn financial and personal information for use of identity theft. Intruders may tamper with a home user's files and information. Intruders may insert malware, viruses, toolkits, or backdoors into a home's user's network. Considerations for business usage threat assessment. Intruders may gather financial details of a home-based business. Intruders may eavesdrop on business communications of employees working from home. Intruders may hijack login. I didn't know. Intruders may hijack logins to corporate accounts. Intruders may insert malware, viruses, rootkits, or backdoors into corporate networks through remote connections. Yeah, that's a good point. Network extensions. Due to the diverse set of network topologies, each with their own unique security concerns and requirements, it is important that a wireless security designer take into account the entire scope of the wireless deployment. Keep in mind that early wireless networks were more of an extension to an existing wired network infrastructure with limited number of APs and small number of users. These early networks allowed users to access these early networks allowed users to access network resources, but they were usually limited as to what information was available. As wireless technology has evolved, so has the need to access more of that available network resources that are on the wired networks. With these wireless advancements, the need for stronger and more robust security solutions is necessary because the wireless network is considered a main part of a network and no longer is an extension with limited use. Since most wireless installations occur at the edge of the wired infrastructure, any weaknesses in the wireless segments can result in vulnerabilities to the wired segments as well. One of the main purposes of the wireless network is typically to provide a point of access to the wired network, which now includes almost all available network resources. Therefore, if the wireless network is compromised, the potential of an intruder to access all network resources is very high. Compromised resources may include databases, application servers, management devices, file servers, client devices, other infrastructure devices, and unpermitted unpermit unpermit unpermitted network access. CWNA Security Review. The following is a review of WLAN security concepts that you may have learned in your CWNA studies from equivalent wireless training or personal experience. The 802.11 Open Systems Authentication. Open System Authentication is a required component of 802.11 devices to connect to a WLAN and is considered a null authentication algorithm. Open System Authentication consists of two 802.11 management frames. These frames are not request and response, but merely identified as authentication. For the most part, his authentication will always be successful from the device's perspective, without any other additional authentication mechanisms. This will allow all information that is sent across the air to be in clear text or plain text, and therefore making it vulnerable to eavesdropping. Most all wireless hotspots will use only open system authentication, and users will have to supply additional authentication methods or encryption solutions such as a VPN to secure their wireless transmissions. Wired Equivalent Privacy, WEP. WEP was intended as a way to protect information on a wireless network from casual eavesdropping, using a 40 bit key and a 24-bit initiation vector. For the most part, protecting from casual eavesdropping is all it accomplished. Let me read that again. For the most part, protecting from casual eavesdropping is all it accomplished. Unfortunately, it was determined early on that WEP was weak and broken. As a result of the way the VI was used in conjunction with the 40-bit encryption key. Although it does not provide adequate wireless security, it should not be used. It may still be in use with some wireless networks due to the continued use of legacy equipment. It is highly recommended to upgrade to newer devices that will support the more secure solutions such as CCMP AES and allow for information traversing on the wireless network to be secure using strong security mechanisms. Technically speaking, all security solutions, WEP, TPIC, and shared key authentications, except for CCMP AES, are depreciated as of the latest 802.11-2012 standard. Organizations should be moving quickly towards complete CCMP AES, which is practically synonymous with WPA2, as you will see later, and removing all depreciated security solutions as soon as possible. Wow, okay. Okay, I think we want to stop now.